This is Chief Chris Butler. I'm here with you this afternoon to announce the arrest of Michael Joseph Day. He's a 45-year-old male for the murder of Kendra Nagy, who's a 33-year-old female. On January 2nd, the victim and suspect were at Overtime Sports Bar early in the evening where the victim also works. However, she was not working that night. The suspect became belligerent, as what's being described as the suspect was talking down to her. Then she asked a female friend for a ride home. The female friend took her back to her house, and when they arrived, the suspect also returned. The suspect got out of his car, walked inside the house, and a few minutes later, the victim got out of her friend's car and walked inside the house as well. During the night, a short time later, the same friend started to receive some concerning text messages in which caused that friend to be alarmed for our victim's safety. When the victim did not show up for work the next day, her friends went over to her house and knocked on the door. The suspect answered the door and let the friends in. When they asked where the victim was, he basically directed them to another room inside the house. When they walked inside the house, they found the victim unresponsive in one of the bedrooms. They also noticed that when the suspect answered the door and in their interactions with him, he actually appeared to be beaten in his face. Unbeknownst to them at the time, he was actually suffering from a single gunshot wound to his head. And I'll take any questions that you may have, but let me just finish up with this. The suspect, he's basically been arrested for murder and is currently recovering from his self-inflicted gunshot wound in the hospital. This is just another example of the fine job that the men and women of the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office are doing to solve these crimes. As you know, it was a very violent weekend in our city, but we're continuing to make strides and progress in all the investigations that we have thus far. And we're actually doing it now at this point with 147 fewer police officers and 90 community service officers. So great job to the men and women at the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. And I'll take any questions that you may have about this.
Stephanie Brown at WOKV, you mentioned the gunshot to the suspect was self-inflicted?
That's correct.
And is there any indication the motive behind this specific incident here?
No, well, the motive is, earlier at the bar, he basically was belligerent towards her, talking down to her. There was no documented incidents of domestic violence between them. They have been together about 3 to 4 years, and they lived in the same house on and off for a period of time as well. From the information that we received, there had to be, I'm guessing, because at this point we haven't been able to speak to the suspect about what happened, because he's basically undergoing treatment for his injuries and everything. So I'd be guessing if I told you, I'd imagine it was some type of argument or something, because she basically through messages, through her friend, basically be concerned for her safety. Sorry for the long answer.
Dana Times Union, if was there any indication that this was a murder-suicide attempt that went bad, or was this a trying to cover up for some type of home invasion? I mean, could it have been a murder-suicide attempt at the beginning that went bad, and then there was a backup plan that somebody came into the house, sort of thing? Do you know anything about
No,
that?
we didn't find any signs of forced entry at the home at all. It was basically our victim and suspect inside the house alone. It basically was a murder, and the suicide, was attempted.
It wasn't. You believe it was an attempted suicide? He shot himself in the head. It wasn't just to cover himself. I mean, he didn't graze the side of his face.
No. He's definitely got a self-inflicted gunshot wound.
And it was an attempted suicide. And that didn't work.
That's correct.
Chief Frank Powers for Channel 4. Is he going to make it?
We believe so.
This is kind of weird. It's a standard suicide move, going right into the head and didn't kill him.
Did not.
Can you say, okay, it's a 30 hour? That's a fairly damn.
What's his condition at this point? Sorry.
What's his medical condition? I don't have that information. I just know he's in the hospital recovering from his injuries.
And you expect him to recover?
Expected.
And he let these friends of the victim into the home and was just acting like normal? Was his behavior suspicious at all at that point? Or?
As far as his mannerisms and everything, they noticed he was been beaten, but he managed to be able to answer the door and kind of function to a certain extent. There's some other details I just don't want to share at this time because it's an active criminal investigation, but he was doing other things inside the house as well.
Any other questions?
You mentioned that he appeared beaten, so do you still believe he was beaten and then shot himself, or was that just a result of this shot?
No, I think that was the friend's interpretation of what they saw when they first looked at the suspect. There's no indication that he's been beaten.
He didn't have any defensive wounds for, in a fight with her, for example, or?
No.
Nothing.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Chief.
Okay, thank you all.
It was more